Send Karen the link once we get it.
Oh shit. Okay. Cool. Now we're live. So, hello
Hi.
everyone.
What's
Hey,
up, everybody?
welcome.
Hey.
Welcome to another thoughtful thoughts. Today we got some more people, which is good. Hopefully, we will be able to have a good conversation. So let's just get into it, huh? So,
Here,
what are we doing here? Yin and yang, good and evil.
my
Like,
loves.
what is exactly? So, let's just start off. So, what is exactly yin and yang? Like, what is the main purpose of it?
Is it essentially just balance of opposites?
Yeah, it's balance of the universe in general. Yin and yang, the belief of yin and yang at least exists in all things. Like the belief of yin and yang is that it exists in all things. Everything is balanced. My favorite way of referencing yin and yang is typically with the people that I know, like the way we balance each other out in personality and everything. Like Kyle, for example, I always say he and I are yin and yang, and not because of our skin color. Uh, but like,
Also, I have this black dot on my chest.
and I for some reason have this like light. I don't know if you can tell. No, but seriously, like yin and yang, I love the concept. I see it as a religious concept. Even I was just talking to Gabe. I'm not sure who all knows Gabe in the stream, but it's a good buddy of mine. Um, and I plan on going to get tattoos on either forearm that kind of represent yin and yang, where one arm will represent yin, the other arm will represent yang. It'll be sleeves in that way. Um, I kind of got off topic, sorry, but I kind of have a bias because I've always enjoyed yin and yang since I've learned about it. Which again, some people also pronounce it yin and yang, etc. Like there are different pronunciations of it. It's a Chinese philosophy originally, I believe. Anybody else have more information than what I have? I know y'all like.
I know yin
So-
represents like the feminine and darkness, and yang represents masculine and lightness and
Yeah, son.
penetration.
Either I guess either or, whichever way you put it, it's still opposites regardless.
Yeah. So I mean, so some
together.
But they all
some
but,
examples. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
they-
Go ahead.
No, you're actually gonna say exactly what I was about to say with better information.
Yeah. So some examples. So we have like dark and light, night and day, cold, heat, winter, summer, rest, movement, sleep, awake, and then obviously the feminine and masculine, which you guys were just talking about.
Yeah.
So
Birth and
pretty
death.
much just polar opposites from what it seems like.
Well, and I guess from what we were seeing is they have different, like yang actually represents specific things and yin actually represents specific things. So it's opposites and like so if you picture the yin and yang symbol, it has the white and black with a line that's not exactly split down the middle, but both sides are still even, representing that there's going to be imbalances, but in the grand scheme, over a timeline, they balance each other out. But they also have these dots in the center of each side, which I read somewhere represents one's ability to change. So essentially, everything's all interconnected. And even though one represents one, there's still the yang within the yin and the yin within the yang.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it kind of shows like, hey, you can't have one without the other.
Oh
it's
yeah.
It's like you can't have it like two separate because then it'll just self-destruct too. You need some kind of mix within the two, regardless.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things about yin and yang, or at least as an artist, as like a drawing artist and whatnot, growing up dealing with colors and whatnot, learning about complementary colors. I don't know who all knows what that is, but there's like red and green are complementary colors. They're made up of completely opposite colors. They match well together. Like red is a primary color, green is a secondary color. Green has no traces of red in it. Same thing with orange and blue, which is why you typically see like basketball teams like the Knicks, orange and blue, Chicago Bears, orange and blue. You have purple and gold, two amazing colors. That's purple and yellow. They're complementary colors. And I kind of feel like they kind of represent yin and yang in a way, which is why they're called complementary colors. They balance each other out. They're opposites because they have no trace of each other within each other, but they balance each other out because of that. Whereas, funny thing about that is that yin and yang do have traces of each other within them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, true.
They show them very differently. They are represented in different ways.
Well, and one thing that an article was pointing out, and this is something I used to talk about all the time, even is just the law of opposites. Like you cannot have, for example, basic example, good without evil. How would you know what is good without there being evil? And what would you define as good? Because I mean, there was another article that Mark had sent that said something about if you destroy evil as it is, then evil will just be redefined. Or if you destroy good as it is, good will be redefined. So what is less evil is now what is good. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yes.
What I saw with that, or what I kind of got out of that, was like that you actually can't have, or it's not that you can't have good without evil, but it's like if you do good, then generally, or like usually, evil is created within that. Same with evil. If evil is created, there's also some kind of good that is created within that. I think an example of that would be, so like, let's just say, let's go on the evil side. So if you uh if you do something evil, so I don't know, you hurt somebody, right? Like you betray them in some way.
Mhm.
Well, on the opposite end now, there's this maybe a motive of some sort to for somebody else to kind of correct that and maybe do some kind of
Mhm.
good to kind of counteract that, which then I guess you could say that the yin and yang, with the idea of there sometimes maybe being more good or evil, like it's that whichever side is starts, there's something that's kind of building up to try to counteract that.
Oh yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
I
if
mean,
that's making if I'm making
I
sense with
follow.
that?
So
I don't know,
it
but
sounds like you're saying essentially like even if you were to kill someone, something that results afterwards could be the good that results of a terrible action. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Oh,
Death.
hi Luke.
Oh, what's up, Luke?
Oh, is he in here? Hell
Yeah, he
yeah.
said
Let's
hi.
see. What did he say? What's up, guy? Yeah, thanks, Luke. Thanks for joining. Um, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I think like another example would be just even simply like death, right? I
Yeah.
guess I wouldn't say death is evil per se. I would say death is kind of more of a negative energy.
Yes.
Um, but with death, right? Like if we were just looking at it from like just you die and you're laying there in the soil. Well, your body becomes the soil, and then with that you become like nutrients
Mhm.
that then
Yeah.
gives life to other things.
True.
So that
And
becomes a positive.
and funny.
That's an interesting point, especially regarding death. But the thing is like, how does it really? Because in the grand scheme of things, people also make up yin and yang. For example, that death, what fear did it cause? Did it rob somebody of a life of specific experiences because their life was taken by someone who was doing evil? Was there a random occurrence that took somebody's life? Where was that person afraid at the end of their life? So I mean, while death is just kind of like a construct in a way, um, it affects people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It you know, some people are afraid of it. Obviously, most people are. Some people die slowly. Some people die quickly and are afraid in their last moment. So it's kind of interesting to look at it from that perspective.
I think,
Um,
yeah, in terms of the death thing too, it's more like, I think, it's more like a cycle. Like it can be like a separating, like somewhat dividing line. The whole thing's like a clock too. Like you reach that light, you're like alive, 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 and then you're
right,
dead, and then you
right,
kind of come back to that. You're kind of born in a different type of aspect, or like a different type of way. So you can be both. I guess it just depends what side you're in at what time in your life,
right.
and that kind of determines how you
Well,
are.
and of course it can be a positive. I don't want to just
Yeah.
say, as morbid as that sounds, there's people that are incredibly
True.
sick and have felt that they've lived a fulfilling life.
Mhm.
So they feel that they've set out to do everything that they want to do. So they welcome death as a mercy in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I think.
especially working in healthcare, you see that all the time with people
Yeah. I
who
would
have
say death in
felt
itself
that.
is a
I think
balance.
that imbalance you probably feel is like illness could be like the imbalance, and then maybe
Right,
death is like
right,
For example, like
actual.
an old lady or an old man who lost their spouse years back and are just like, all right, I'm ready.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep,
I mean, there's always going to be balance to everything. It's crazy to think like even the resulting actions that happen have a balance to them. Like
right,
there might be some guy who's like, you know what, man, that guy was a pain in my ass. I'm happy he's gone. And there's some
Mhm.
other guy who's like, that was the most important guy in my life. This is terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all these different like emotions that come along with it.
Yeah.
Like,
I actually really
yeah.
appreciate the way that death and birth together represent the balance of things and yin and yang, because like let's use the example of someone who dies of old age peacefully or anything like that. It's still a loss of a life, which you can see is like, you know, a sad thing. It's like, man, there are people who cared about them. It's dark. However, it's peaceful for them. Like they finally get that relief of saying, you know, like you said, I've lived a happy life. I'm done. I get to move on to the next whatever is after this. Meanwhile, birth, it's seen as, you know, this, it's a beautiful thing. Like, you know, it's a creation of life. It's something to look forward to. However, at the same time, many births, you could ask a mother and say, yeah, no, I don't want to do that again. It's not
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah, in the beginning of it, right? You're
Exactly.
maybe you're holding your baby and you're like, oh wow, like I created this. This is great, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe like a year or so passes and it might still feel that way. And then you go into the terrible twos.
Yeah.
Now you're like, I want to strangle this little mother, you know. And then
I like how
and then it kind of like it goes from that to almost being like a negative thing, but then somewhere along the kid's life, right,
Yeah.
it becomes again, oh yeah, you know, like wow, I'm really proud of my son or daughter, you know, they're doing really good, or
Oh, yeah.
maybe they're doing really bad at some point, but then, you know, somewhere along the way you hope that they kind of correct it themselves, and then
Right.
yeah.
Well, you know, the way that the universe balances things is sometimes comical, because birth is such a beautiful thing that even if you don't consider death to offset it, the earth is like, let's just make it so painful for women that it just sometimes splits them.
Exactly.
It just like skin open.
It's like, sorry, but you're going to be pooping and giving birth to a new life at the same time. You're
Hey, you
not
know
going to
the-
like it, but
I don't want to get too gruesome, but I had a nah, I'm not gonna say that one.
yeah.
Maybe that's why it's so beautiful though.
Yeah.
It's because
Oh, yeah.
all that energy and all that pain and stuff that they have to go through, and then to come out of it with life, you know. I mean, I don't know. I couldn't really give like like an actual like from actual experience, but like it just seems like that would be like a very rewarding thing.
Oh yeah. Well, and you know, a common misconception about yin and yang is a lot of people see it as good versus evil, which is yin and yang. It's a form of it because they're opposites. You know,
Yes.
good, bad, good, evil, whatever you want to call it. And I know we wanted to talk a little bit about that, but how do you want to start that? Do you want to go with that wolf story, or get on to some of the questions here?
Oh, the wolf story.
Yeah, let's do that
Yes.
wolf story. So
Yeah.
here, I'll just
Go ahead.
want me to just read it real quick. So
Yeah.
an old Cherokee is teaching his grandson about life. A fight is going on inside me, he said to the boy. It's a terrible fight, and it is between two wolves. One is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. He continued, the other is good. He is joy, peace, love, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside you, and inside every other person too. The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, which wolf will win? The old Cherokee simply replied, the one you feed.
I like that story, man. That's
I
a
love
good
that
story.
one.
Yeah.
I was actually
Which-
really glad when you sent that, because the first time I actually saw that story, it was on a banner in my guidance counselor's office.
Oh, nice.
School.
Yeah.
Wow.
I freaking love that. Like, and as soon as I saw, for one, the wolf is my favorite animal. So anytime you show me the
Yeah.
wolf, I'm gonna be like, but the way they use that story to describe yin and yang, like you said, like it describes a great balance of things, and that ending of the one you feed is the one that, you know, will win. It's just a sweet way of telling a story and ending it with a one sentence lesson.
Yeah.
It's
So-
also a good way of describing, like, you know, like the angel and the demon on your shoulders. You know what I mean? Like he literally describes them both and says, like, they're almost entities. Like you have an internal dialogue with two sides either going like, dude, I gotta play these right. I gotta, you know, make these people happy. And then there's the other side. It's just like, you know what? Screw everything. I really don't want to be here. I don't want to do all this. I just want to, you know, lay in bed and have money and whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I think the biggest one, at least that well, yeah, that I've gone through really is like, like with anxiety, or like just feeling like, yeah, just feeling like anxious about things, right? Whether it's like work or school, all those factors, right? That kind of like build up inside of you, and it makes you like, like I said, worry, or
Mhm.
like you kind of maybe you start doubting yourself about like certain things, and that's because you let that consume you, right? And you shouldn't. You should kind of like, just calm down, and remember that, hey, like everything's gonna be all right at the end of the day, right? Like it's maybe perhaps like the things that you're worried about, you come through to the other side, and it becomes a rewarding experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you shouldn't really forget that those are there though at the same time. Like they're gonna be part of you too. And so I think
Oh
you
no,
should
yeah.
like
What I mean
acknowledge
is
that.
just to not like, let
Yeah,
it
for sure. I
bother
get
you. Like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. You're still gonna have that side to you, but I think trying to understand where that comes from and kind of deal with it on an inside level, if not an outside perspective level. I think that's the better way to do it.
Yeah.
It's really interesting too, because like even when you take going back to like the two wolves, into account, and which one will win, it's sort of a balancing act in a way, because you have, let's say, like the good, and then you also have the bad. And I don't know if you want to go in terms of the wolves or whatnot, but when you experience things such as like self-doubt or anxiety and whatnot, what matters is how you work through that, because you can easily, by letting the evil wolf win or what have you, you sit and stew in that type of negativity. If you have
Yeah, it
specific
eats you up.
thoughts,
Mhm.
right? And if you feel like, well, I'm not good enough at my job, or I'm not moving fast enough in life, or today was a pretty stressful day, I must not be as efficient as I thought I was. I mean, yeah, it's good to recognize and feel those negative thoughts, but what really matters is how you work through that, because you have to reinforce that with the good wolf, in a sense, that even though today was a bad day, I'm still alive, I've still got breath in my body, i
Yep.
can i can have a better day tomorrow, uh I can make new experiences and overcome challenges by understanding what I did wrong and focus on what I can do right. So even though it is a balancing act, you always it's so important to kind of over overtake the bad self-doubt and negative thought and replace it with good and positivity as much as possible.
Well, yeah, and they talk about the power of the mind often.
Right.
They meaning just like people in general. The power of even prayer, of just whatever you're putting into your mind, it becomes almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you're going to tell yourself, "I'm a no good piece of shit," well,
Right.
guess what you are?
Mhm.
You know.
Right.
Right.
Well, and just not
And
even to
that's
get like not even to get like super deep, or go off in on a tangent, but I wouldn't say recently, but like a couple months ago, I mean, I was thinking specific thoughts that were incredibly not helpful, and as I was thinking those thoughts, my mind was just making me, it felt so powerful in a sense, because it was literally destroying my soul in a
Oh
way.
yeah, you get this
I
fog that
was,
just
yeah,
overtakes everything else. All the
yeah,
positive is just gone. There's
Mhm.
yeah,
a lot of common like almost fallacies in your brain when you start to get negative that just
yeah,
beat away of everything. You disqualify the positive. You
yeah,
have certain connotations that you label yourself,
right,
that earlier. There's dozens of things that people do as soon as they start, even entertaining those negative thoughts for just a second too long. It can
right.
overtake.
I think the cool
Well,
part
well,
is
and what was interesting is when this was happening, it was as I was on the job, and what I noticed is when I was thinking those incredibly negative thoughts, I really was trying to nip that in the bud as quickly as possible to try to get back into a positive mindset, because it was affecting the way I was working. It was affecting the way I was interacting with the people that day. It was affecting, just the overall experience in general. And I mean, just if you stay in that mindset too long, that negative mindset too long, I mean, it affects every aspect of your life, and will continue doing so in a negative way unless you can, get out of it.
Yeah.
So
And you have that choice to actively be happy. Like you can choose to get out of that mindset,
Right.
And so
Right.
you don't have to be in that area the whole time. Like you can, if
Right.
you want to be happy, you can choose to be like, I want to be this and not be this today.
Right.
And that's what's really cool. You can actually you can decide that, and it's hard. It's sometimes very
Right.
hard once you get
Absolutely.
ingrained with all that bad stuff in your head. You just keep
Yeah.
on thinking about it constantly, and that becomes you, unfortunately.
And the funny thing is, a lot of the times, whenever like something will happen to someone, and
Yeah.
it's your reaction that dictates what it does, because no one else can make you mad, happy, angry, sad, anxious,
Right.
anything. Only you can do that. You have an initial reaction called a primary emotion. So, snap judgment, as soon as something happens, someone dies, you get sad.
Right.
But then you could go, oh, this changes everything. Why does the world do this to me? Why take my person, and then become angry and bitter and resentful for 6 months and go through an actual depression instead of grieving with it as you could have.
Right.
And actually, I I wonder, because the next question says, how does one become a good or bad person? But I wonder if it goes back to that story of the wolves. Is it what you feed that makes you a good or bad person? It gets you into a mindset that makes you do good or bad things?
Yeah, that energy, the wolf that you feed, right? It if you're deciding to be negative and not look at the good things that you have in your life, right? Then you start to be that negative person, and then through that, right, you start to affect the people around you, and the people around you will go, oh yeah, like this person's being a negative Nancy or something like that, right? And then maybe they're trying to be positive, and then through that they'll just kind of forget about you, and then that's the being negative all the time like that. You just kind of like people just kind of start to not want to be around you, or
Yeah.
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 And I mean, that kind of sums it up pretty well. I mean,
Yeah.
but I wonder, like, is there even a such thing as a good or a bad person?
Actually, I kind of wish so years ago I had a note saved in my phone that had just lists and lists of a lot of things we're talking about. So I kind of wish I still had it. But I talked specifically about this topic about because I actually got it from my nerds I was about to show. I believe it was Attack on Titan. There was a scene in which one of the characters says, a bad person to you is whoever is doing you wrong in that moment.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, if someone attacks you on the street, to you, that's that's the enemy, that's the bad person. Meanwhile, if they have some kind of grudge against you specifically, something that like you did that hurt them or someone they loved not long ago, for them and whoever it is that you may have wronged before, they are a good person. They're like, doing vengeance. Like, they're
so do you think whenever people have war, they go, yeah, we're the bad guys, but we're gonna win this one.
Exactly. Like, the bad person is whoever is, in that specific moment, your enemy. Just like the saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. It's, your enemy has an enemy. You may not know that person, but if you two have a common goal, they're a good person to you. Meanwhile, this could be someone who later on is in no way, useful to you, is no way good to you. So the concept of good and bad will always flow, which I actually love. I pulled up here on my phone even the idea of, so the symbol of yin and yang, the circle with the black and white and everything, it's called the Taijitu, I believe it's pronounced. And I love the design of it in general because the whole concept of it, for one, it clearly portrays, black and white, good and evil, dark and light, etc. It also, like you pointed out, the two dots in the center, they represent the opposite side being within it and the ability to change. But my favorite thing about it is that in the center, the way it's split, it's not just like a split in half line.
It's like a timeline.
It flows, it waves, which kind of shows how, this can be a wavy thing. There's not a solid, this is good, this is bad, this is dark, this is light. It flows, it changes. The entire design of it, I love it. I think it's genius.
Yeah.
I hate to go back to what we were kind of talking about last time, but
No,
I think it's a good example. Right, like Hitler.
I know, dude. I was thinking the
I
same
was talking about earlier.
because
nobody, I don't think there's anybody in the world right now that could say without with a straight face that Hitler was a good person. I think everybody can say that he was evil. He was that what he did was fucked up, right? But if you looked at any old school, German from that time, they might say like a Nazi German, they might say,
White
"Oh,
supremacist hell.
Hitler was a good man and he really protected us." And like even though that's not
The overall view of things.
everybody else would say, "No, this dude was fucked up."
Well,
But
and
to
oh,
them,
sorry.
he might have there was some positive energy there outside of all the or inside of all all
I
the
believe
negative
I've
shit
heard
that he was
Well,
doing.
and also it's interesting to note that everybody is everybody is born with a clean slate. And when you look at when you look at Hitler as like a person, right? When he was born, he was a clean slate. He was able to be molded in any which way, would whichever way the universe wanted to mold him. And what was interesting is what really caused him to be evil in a sense. Because here's the thing: he used to be an artist. He
Yeah.
he loved art. He liked music. I'm sure he had other vices that gave him joy for a time. But going back to he became self-obsessed and with hatred and self-doubt and whatnot, always blaming different people for the problems within his country, or using other people as scapegoats, and just continuously really being one big ball of anger. And instead of using and I'm not trying to praise him in any way. When you look at him on camera, one of the gifts that he actually did have is he was a phenomenal speaker.
Oh
He
yeah.
could get people behind him with no problem. And I always thought to myself, imagine if he used that speaking talent for good, to
Oh.
unite people as opposed to divide people, or to preach economic prosperity for all people within Germany instead of a select few. I mean, things could have been very different. But what I guess I'm getting at is he let so much resentment and hatred into his soul that
Oh yeah.
it really warped him to a point where he became one of the most evil people.
Vile people ever,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, one of the most vile people in
But
history.
Speaking of him too, because I think it's more like experience as well, like makes you determine what's good and what's evil. Like for him, as you
Right,
said, clean state, he was
right,
pretty much, not to say he was a good guy, but like at that time,
right,
like he didn't know what was good and what was bad. Like when he was born, like when he was younger,
right.
essentially. So I think what really changed him is what he saw in his life,
well,
and so that
Well,
really,
and on top of that, I didn't
yeah,
even include the fact that he didn't really have a lot of social emotional support. His
no.
mother was distant. His father used to beat him relentlessly. I mean, not that I'm excusing anything of what
No,
he
No,
yeah, I know
did,
no.
what you said.
But
but when
I,
you don't have that support system or that type of love in your life,
oh yeah,
that
it makes
can,
it difficult.
yeah,
Well, and that's
I
the
mean,
thing, man. Like people's values and their excuses they make. Like I guarantee you, all of us here have something that we've done that we maybe regret or
right,
something like that. And the thing is, like, I mean, with most humans, like for Hitler, his values, like I guarantee you, he valued nationalism and thought he was doing right by
Mhm.
everyone. He
right,
thought, hey,
Yeah.
this is a necessary evil, and
right.
I'm not a bad person, even though it's objective. That's a fucked up thing. This is bad.
It's
Like,
funny.
it's
Nelly
a
has a
100 years later, people talk about it,
exactly.
But like, I mean, there are some people that they'll kill and they'll go, I had to. There was a reason, this and that. But you defend
Mhm.
and then you do bad things. People are not. I don't think people are inherently good or bad. I think they're a mixture of both.
Right.
Yin and yang.
Yeah, and some people will be on the high end of that yin and yang, where they have more of the white than black. Some will be on the low end, where they have more black than white. I don't think anyone's purely evil or anyone's purely good. Most people, when they do something, they think they're still a good person.
Mhm.
There's not a
Right.
lot of people who are like genuinely like, I'm a piece of shit and I like it. There are a few,
Yeah.
Right.
but there's
That-
not a lot.
It seems like in all of these like revolution like type situations that have happened throughout time, like it always seems like the beginning, like the main push uh to start a revolution. It always is like it seems good, right? Like it's like, oh yeah, I could see why they want to get out of what their situation is now. And then they're successful, and then they start doing their own thing, and then somewhere along the line, I feel like power and all that kind of like corrupts the main what they were going for
It's usually
initially.
one of the 7 deadly sins, ironically. I actually realized that a while ago that they call it the deadly sin because it's not that it's necessarily a sin now, but it's going to lead you to some bad shit.
Yeah,
Greed,
Mhm.
you know, sloth, etc.
yeah, right.
Envy,
Wrath.
lust.
So like that's maybe
What's up,
that's
Mecca?
another factor in
What's up, bro?
these old historical leaders. I mean, even in communism, right? Like they always said. I remember even in school, communism, like it looks good on paper, but then once it's actually practiced, all the other factors make it messed up.
Well, and when you even look at like any economic system in general, I mean, who normally benefits? It's usually the people who are able to exploit others.
Yeah,
Um,
the ones in
and
power.
on top of it, when you do tend to preach, oh yeah, equal or not so much equality, but prosperity for the common man, they're always trying to do an us versus them mentality.
Mm.
And that type of populism,
Yeah.
anger, fear mongering, that's what really sells. So really what happened with most revolutions is they were, I don't want to say marketed, but they were communicated
Kind of
completely.
marketed for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Propaganda.
sure.
Because
But I
even
mean, the
even in
way it was marketed was just it was a fear tactic as opposed to a unification of prosperity for the poor, the middle class, the well off, what have you. Um, and like I said, it's usually the sycophants and the sociopaths that tend to benefit from that type of
The ones who want the
uh,
position of power in the first
right,
place. Yeah.
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah.
No,
So
Yeah, they kind of feed the people uh something, right? Like oh, you vote for me, this is going to happen, and I'm going to
yeah,
change this and that, and then they get into power, and then what actually it changed?
right,
What did you do on those?
And they're really smart about it
What did
too.
you do to change what you
right,
said you would?
And they're
You
smart
know,
about it too. They do it like when people are at their lowest. Like they won't do it when people are at their highest. Like if you look
well,
at
right?
World War II, a
they
lot of
typically tear them
the
down to
you,
get
Hitler
you
stuff and all those people were like done. They were like, "There's no money, there's no economy," and here comes this person saying, "Hey, I'm gonna
Yeah.
free you all from this." A lot of the time, that's where most
Uh.
of it came out from.
I genuinely
Yeah.
think that governments purposely bring like they plan to bring their people down and have propaganda as like a marketing technique to get exactly what they want.
And
right,
as Mark was even pointing out earlier, not the specific way, but to add on to it, like let's use example, the government has the whole statement, there's a separation of church and state,
Mhm.
and yet at the same time on the dollar bill we haven't got we trust. And it's sad how often religion is used in order to like do evil things. Like they do it in the name of like, oh no, we're doing right, but really it's like it's an evil deed when it comes to it. And the
right.
rapper Ellie actually has a line where he says, more people have died in the name of the Lord than in any natural disaster, disease, or gang war. And it's like if we go back to the Hitler situation, it's again they were thinking they were doing the right thing, saying, "Oh no, God wants us to be, the super people. We are the best people on earth." And they're thinking that they're doing everything by God, but in reality, all they're doing is killing. Like you're just taking lives. It's a lot. And even
You know,
even
that actually makes me wonder. So, okay, I used to have this like I used to ask people this all the time, but if there's a mother, this is just a basic example. If there's a mother who drowns her babies in a tub, right? Because in her head, demons told her she had to do it, or else something much more terrible would happen. Is she a bad or a good person? Still, is obviously it's a bad
Mm.
deed, but does that
in
kill
my
her
opinion,
character?
she is a sad victim in that situation.
That's what I'm
It's
saying.
someone
It's
who obviously does not have control over her own mind, and so she did a deed that
But now we take that to a larger scheme. And what
Mhm.
if Hitler genuinely thought he had a message from God? You got to kill these Jews, man. Like,
and with that said, it actually
Well,
I
he was something psychological there. Like
yeah.
exactly.
yeah,
Like, I mean, because
he
you
was
can't
fucked
call the
up.
victim. That dude planned to kill 6 million people.
And see, and
Right.
because of how, like you said, 6 million people, the large scale of that,
Yeah.
it's very easy to go like, dude, Hitler, no.
Right.
While again, back to like, if he's out of his mind or whatever it may be, he didn't with his own bare hands kill 6 million people. So how much fault do we leave on all the people who were like, working for him, agreeing with him, saying like, yes, he's right. are they in their right mind? Like, do we say that
Right.
like are they good people? They were thinking they're doing the right thing, or are they inherently evil people?
But I
Like,
guess they didn't really have any direction either. Most of them were just like, we think we're doing good because Hitler told us that we're going to be better if we do this. You know, I guess
Yeah.
the
Right.
experience also is kind of
People are
marketed
Another
that way.
another
are-
good example of that
Mm-hmm.
was Charlie Manson, right? Like
yeah.
mhm.
he had all these young kids that had nowhere to go, and they were like, oh man, like look at this guy, he's giving us a place to stay, we got food every day. And then all of a sudden, like he just kind of turned that around and was like, hey,
Yo, Kino.
I'm this guy, and
Mhm.
this, you got to do this for me now. And it's just like people just like Sachin said, they get these people at desperate times in their life, and then like they're like, oh, like they get them to a point where, oh wow, yeah, like this guy really helped me out, I will do anything for this
Right.
person.
Right.
And
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
then that happens. But
Yeah. It's always
Well,
people.
I mean, like, how exactly? What is really challenging is how exactly do you even begin to like understand people like that in the first place? Because every time you hear something about, let's say, I don't know, like Ted Bundy or Charles Manson, it's never from a mental health perspective. Like, what personally were they? What drove them to do something that vile? You know, to kill to
It's
kill
probably really
people
hard.
indiscriminately.
It's probably
Um,
really hard to determine that for an artist too, because
right,
in the beginning, it makes it seem like it's kind of the best way to go. Like you have no
right.
second thoughts, you know. And then
But also, how do you understand and get to the bottom of something when a lot of these people are diagnosed psychopaths and sociopaths? A psychopath or a sociopath
Mhm.
will never admit that what they are doing is wrong.
Right.
yeah,
You can't get to the bottom of this behavior when one, this behavior isn't curable in the first place, which is, pretty scary. And two, they never approach it from that type of perspective. It's always, oh, this person was so evil, which again, the acts that they were doing was evil, but they're not looking at the bigger picture.
it's
What
hard for them
happened
probably.
to the,
It's sorry, I think it's probably hard for them to
yeah,
look at the bigger picture because if you're the
right.
victim in this
Of
case, how
course.
are you going to look at the bigger picture? You're
Right.
looking at it from
Right.
the non-victim perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's an
A lot of
excellent
people
point,
have that
you know?
victim mentality that kind of keeps them trapped
Yeah.
into thinking whatever I do is justified because I was screwed out over first, you know.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know?
And it's
Yeah.
it's a pretty hard topic to talk about with evil and what's inherently evil, what's subjectively evil,
Right.
especially due to, once again, that goes right back to it's yin and yang, and yang gets balance.
Yeah.
But if you talk about the dark side and say, oh, but it's necessary, it brings balance, the victim can't sit there and say that was necessary. The victim will be like, no, I didn't have to be a part of that. Where's my balance? I didn't get the good, I just got the bad. And so it's a very, very difficult topic to talk about.
We
Yeah.
actually had a question based off that, and I even so. Do good and evil exist in nature, or are they human constructs? So I had a class on the philosophy of morality before, or ethics or something, way back in college, and there's a bunch of theories about how can you define what is good objectively and what is evil objectively. Like, how do you know? Like, is it whatever maximizes the potential of goodness, like an action that could have the best chance to produce good in the world? Is that what good is? Is that what the best action is? You know what I mean? Like, so I was telling you guys earlier, so I know you guys are familiar, but I've always been kind of intrigued by the idea that everything in nature just is. There's no such thing as anything, really. Like, everything just exists.
Mhm.
Because so I know someone who doesn't believe in dinosaurs. I told you guys earlier. It's my mom. My mom doesn't believe in dinosaurs. It's the weirdest thing. But so what she told me one day, she goes, okay, so you mean to tell me that there were these big lizard things called dinosaurs? I'm like, they weren't called dinosaurs. Just not. We called them that after we found the bones. We're like, okay, we'll call these things dinosaurs.
Yo, what's
They
up, Tito
just
Rex?
were. Yeah. What's up, T-Rex? Hey, Velociraptor, how you been, man? No, everything just is. So by that definition, now I think in society, good and evil clearly exist. There's clearly a negative impact from murders. There's clearly a negative impact from if someone were to steal my shit. There's going to be negatives that come to me, and now I have to deal with it. So you have to set up a system in place that says this is bad, you will be punished. But in nature, is there such thing? Murder is necessary in nature. If you don't kill, you're not eating.
I think
Yeah, it's a form of survival.
yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
bird. There's a bird that I saw. I think it was on like Animal Planet one time.
Oh, I hope.
They had there was so this bird had two different chicks or whatever you want to call them, and the one was a little a little more like on the
Obtuse.
malnutrition side or whatever. Like it wasn't really eating. I don't think even itself. Like it was just it was weak. And then the other one was a little more like strong. It was stronger, and it was actually attacking the sibling, like the weaker sibling, and it was like pecking at it and everything. And the mother comes back, and it's got a mouthful of water and food, and instead of giving it to the weaker bird, she just dumps the entire all the water it has in its mouth to the stronger one and then feeds it. So you look at that, right, and you see like what Kyle said, yeah, it's just nature. But
Yeah.
if we saw like a human mother do that, you'd be like, you fucking piece of shit.
You'd be like that.
Like,
Yeah.
Kieran
like,
actually,
you know?
Kieran actually
Right.
added in the
I think-
chat a great thought on that. That kind of it represents so cockatoo birds, they leave their eggs in other birds' nests,
Mhm.
or is it cuckoo? It's one of the two birds. They leave their eggs in other birds' nests in order for their young to be raised by a better family, like by weaker birds that it'll end up being the stronger one. And oddly, like you pointed out with humans, we look at behavior as of like just feeding one strong child to be like despicable. It's like, how do you not care for both children?
Right.
While if you look at the nature side of it, it's like it's survival. It's you're doing something that seems evil, but in reality, it's like I'm feeding the one that's more likely to survive.
If this
in
one's
order
weak,
to-
it's going to die.
Exactly, this one's going
So,
to die.
I think also
It's-
piggybacking
right.
off of that too, probably is that there probably was good and evil the whole time, like in that respect. But I think your brains just didn't develop enough to kind of understand what it was, if you know what I'm saying. Like
Sure, that's
birds
right.
and them, like
Right,
they
'cause-
know what they're doing, but
So
like we just
constructs
kind
more
of
of an understanding than anything.
to understand that this is good, this is evil,
Okay.
but they never like distinguished that really before.
That's
but
true.
it might have been there.
Well,
Kieran in the
like you
chat-
said, it's kind of it's a survival. It's a
course.
survival
Yeah,
instinct.
Yeah.
Like it's
it's
not.
like more of an
It's not
instinct.
like
Yeah.
they're thinking. I think, like you said, they're
Yeah.
not really thinking about it because they don't have time to. They just
Mhm.
it's just like, hey,
Mhm.
look, I gotta have one of my one of my children. They gotta live, and this one's dying, so screw him. Like
Yeah.
it's easy. It's easier
Yep.
for them because
Well,
Yeah,
Mark,
we probably
so
evolved to
in
kind
the
of like
comments-
understand it.
Hey, so
Yeah.
in the comments, Kieran says, going back to exactly what we're saying, he says, I think the evil is just instinct to survive. So what you're saying is like split second decisions that you make to survive are evil if it's not a split second decision. If it's something that you're consciously just going like,
thought
I don't
about
need
it
this,
and-
but fuck it. But he also said earlier, because I feel like I probably should have went through some of these comments as I was reading them. He says, going back to I think when we were talking about Hitler and Charles Manson, he said people want something or someone to believe in, and most of those people are ignorant. Doesn't mean they're stupid; they just don't know any better. So it's essentially what we said: people are sheep, and they're just going to follow blindly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look, we have Twitter now where you specifically are a follower of people.
Yeah. If you think someone knows what they're doing, you know
Right.
what you're doing. You're going to go with it.
that kind of takes us into this question here: is the internet good, bad, or neutral?
I mean, that depends on what type
all
of
the above.
information.
Because it became
Yeah.
more
All the
evil
above.
of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, how you utilize the information matters. I mean,
Yeah.
you can look at there's tons of news sources. Everybody says, "Oh, well, the news is so biased." The news that is true, but there are specific news organizations such as the Associated Press that isn't really owned by any type of major news corporation where they just report the news. How you absorb that news or how you take that and choose to use that information is entirely up to you. And that's not just in the news sense. That's just in terms of whatever you search on the internet.
Oh
You
yeah.
just view it, you know.
So the most evil part of the internet, I think, objectively, is the dark web, right? But I mean, there's
Right.
good in the evil. Like just the fact that you hear these stories of the deep web means you know that shit's out there, so you know you got to be careful. There's good
Right.
that comes from that.
Which the funny
Right.
thing that I at least see about not necessarily funny, but the thing that I notice about the deep web versus like just the internet in general is the regular internet that we all like see, the one that we're streaming on right now, it's just like the tip of the iceberg, and it's actually controlled by like a overarching government.
An
Like,
ISP
yeah,
or-
exactly.
Right.
And so the internet itself, I believe you'd have to say is neutral because you can get good from it, you can get evil from it, you can get either thing. A question that would go even deep in that is wondering like the ISPs or the government or whatever is like, controlling what gets put onto the internet, what's allowed there, what isn't allowed there. Are they evil? Is that evil? Like, do they do evil things? Are they selfish? Are they, do they have people's best interest in mind? Because you can get a lot of false information on the internet.
I think it definitely goes both ways. Like either you choose what you want or you get, like if you look at Instagram, if you look at Facebook and all that, you don't actively choose to see that stuff. It just gets presented to you.
Yeah.
And so it kind of depends how you take that information as well. Like who knows, as you
Exactly,
said, someone else may be controlling as much as what you're seeing. Your feed is dependent on what you see day to day. So it's definitely being, I guess, accommodated to what you're trying to see and what you're trying not to see.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean also in what you interact with. I mean, you're exposed to a lot of specific stories, whether you're on Facebook or Instagram or what have you. I mean, how you interact with it is what matters. I mean, I've seen some really crazy posts from specific family members, friends, whatnot. Not nobody here, mind you. But I mean, what I choose to do with that information, is entirely
I remember
up to me.
one time, and I think this was so I had just gotten a smartphone, so this was in college, and I was talking to somebody in passing. We were talking about guitars, and I had brought up the double neck guitar that Jimmy Page uses in Stairway to Heaven, and I was like, man, one of these days I'll rack up enough money for that guitar.
Nice.
It's a very expensive guitar. But anyway, so I get home later and I'm on Facebook, and this is when they still had the ads, right, like on the side.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a Gibson EDS 1275 at Guitar Center, and I'm like, what the hell? Like we were just talking about this.
Just stirring up the economy.
So there's the people of the internet kind of listening in on you and just throwing information at you.
Hey,
and then
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Because I was going to change the topic.
Okay, I'll just add this quick thing then.
Okay.
Basically, I like to analyze the fact that using the internet versus using social media specifically, I think lays down a huge grounds for conversation of if you're going to talk about what you're seeing and what you're doing, you can get onto the internet, you choose what website you go to, you choose what video you click on, etc., etc. However, I personally avoid social media as often as possible. I have social media, but I'm not on there often. And it's because I feel like social media itself isn't evil, but it puts the hands of what you can see or what you are going to see into it puts what you see into other people's hands. Easy. You don't go on Facebook and say, I only want to see posts about funny memes today. You're going to see people's relationships, ups and downs. You're going to see fights. You're going to see news, random videos. You're going to see a mixture of everything. And while, those sites, while social media does still say if you tend to like more posts that are memes or with this kind of topic going on about it, we'll show you more of that.
Yeah.
It still doesn't stop, I'm friends with a bunch of people online, and yet, they're all so many different types of people from so many different places that the stuff they put out, I'm clicking and liking through many different topics of things. So I'll go on and see, I'm in control of what I see still. I'm in control of what I see. I can choose not to interact with something that I don't want to see more of. But at the same time, the easiest way to clear that obstacle is to go all right, it's not something I want.
I feel like that's harder said than done for some people though, because most people now get the information unfortunately through social media, and so a lot of that is what they see is kind of what they know. It's a lot they can't. I feel like it's hard for them now to choose this is good, this is bad, because what they see is probably is good or bad.
But I just learned the other day, scrolling through social media, that did you know that vaccines cause autism?
So one crazy thing that I always remember about we'll just say even with YouTube, right? And Sachin can attest to this because me and Sachin spent a lot of time on YouTube over the years, right?
Oh my God!
And you would go from watching the Sticks on Crack videos or something like that to all of a sudden you're watching some stand-up comedians, right? Then just for some reason, right now you're watching criminal videos or those catch a predator videos, and then you're, YouTube always was like, well, especially back in the the early days, it was just this crazy funnel of just random nonsense that you would see.
Oh yeah.
Oh wow, like that looks
yeah.
interesting,
Oh, yeah. Then you're on geographic shapes.
yeah.
Who in the world would thought that would be something you click on?
Yeah.
Out of nowhere, watching some steel press push into clay.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, it's so random. And you're not
the hot
actually
press.
searching for that too. It's so like you just find it.
1,000-degree knife.
Hey, so Kieran also asked if you think money is bad or evil, but that goes to one of the questions we already had lined up, which is can inanimate objects be either good or bad? And in my opinion, I don't think they can. I think they can create bad or good. I mean, if like a gun in itself is not inherently bad. A gun could be used for protection of your family. That's a good thing. A gun could be used to kill a family. That's a bad thing.
I think it's definitely in the eye of the beholder. Like who is using it?
Who's the guy?
Right.
I think that just transgresses into the object itself, is what you're making it out to be.
What are your intentions with this object? Because money in general was a great when it was first developed. It was just awesome for bartering. You kidding me? Now I don't have to come up with something. I have to trade it to someone else who wants it. Give me money.
Right.
I go, hey, I want this. However, eventually, whenever something's that easy to use, greed becomes so much easier,
and the value of it changes heavily. Yeah,
it did a lot of good. It did a lot of bad. So,
going back to the gun thing too, it kind of also answers this question of, is it really evil if it has good motives? Because, like, right, so people see the gun, right, like a firearm is something bad, right? Like there's a whole thing about whether or not we should ban them and all that. But then when you look at it in Kyle's perspective, if you're using the gun to protect yourself, right, and you're okay, so you might kill that evil person, right? That might still technically be a bad thing, but kind of the ending is good because you just killed you ended the threat.
I think also a gun is probably maybe the hardest thing to use. Like, I think a gun is probably a little harder to describe in this point because a gun's always been, I guess, used in movies, books, and all that to be more like a bad type of connotation. Like if you're talking about something random, like a duck or something, like that's harder to like describe as good or bad.
Yeah.
I think the connotation of a gun is already you already have some kind of bias to that already.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, no, it can be used as good and bad. I think definitely it still depends on who holds it or what their intentions are with it. But
exactly, like I would never let Sachin handle a gun. No way.
Probably.
No way, dude.
No. Maybe a water gun.
A water gun, maybe. I wouldn't trust myself with one.
I feel like I wouldn't trust any of us with a gun. I feel like
dude,
I've already learned I can't trust myself.
So how about we move on to the next one? Because this is another good one. If someone does a kind deed but has a selfish motive, does that impact the goodness of that deed? So, and vice versa. If someone does an evil deed and they have a good motive for doing it, like we've already discussed a little bit, does it impact or is it, again, go back to yin and yang where there is evil and good, there's good and evil?
I guess maybe it probably doesn't make them per se a bad person. Like, I guess if their motives are different, I think it's all motive based. Like if your motive was to do good and it turns out to be something like terrible, then I feel like you shouldn't be at fault, but you should understand that what you did is not the greatest and you should change from it. I think inherently you shouldn't be the issue. It's what you did. You should learn from it. And if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it, honestly.
Is it all right if I reference a movie for this topic?
Sure.
Because there's a specific scene I could think of. Hopefully this isn't like terrible spoilers or anything if anybody cares to watch it. But there's the movie Band Slam from years ago. And there's a scene in which one of the characters, I believe her name was Charlotte, that could be wrong. Anyway, one of the characters, she's been hanging out with the main character throughout the movie. She's this like popular hot chick, and he's like this dopey guy who's kind of awkward. And eventually when he like stops hearing from her, he goes to her house. They're like, hey, what's going on? And he sees her outside of her house, like really sad and wearing all black and everything. And you find out that her grandfather had passed away or whatever, who she was really close with. And she like is telling the dude to get away from her. And it's because you find out that for the last few months while her grandfather was sick, she had made a promise to God that she would try to be a better person. So she started hanging out with him because she saw him as a lame, like uncool guy. She thought, oh, if I hang out with him, get him some cool points, that'll be a good person. Like that'll keep my granddad alive. When her granddad died, she was like, that's all wrong. It's not true. Whatever, screw him. And it's like, so she did it with the intentions of, I need to be a better person. I want my grandfather to live. This guy gets cool points. So all around, it sounds like, those are good things. However, in the end, she hurt him by ditching him and having him now feel like, oh, wow, I was just a charity product to you. And so it kind of goes back to the question of like, is she redeemable then? Was that like an evil thing for her to do, for her to, in her mind, decide this person's life is now, going to be better because of me? Or, it's a selfish reason for her to have done that.
It feels like there's an incredible amount of ignorance behind the decision making that complicates it to me.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like,
agreed.
I guess that forward thinking too, like she has to know the consequences of that too, and that's where it's also tough. Like if she does this, if she lets this guy go, they're going to be consequences, regardless if the grandfather lives or dies.
Yeah.
There's going to be someone's going to get hurt regardless.
Her actions after the grandpa died is what makes it seem more
Exactly.
evil. You know what I mean? Yeah,
Right.
because like she did a good deed and she had even good reasons for it, kinda. I mean, they were unrelated reasons, but then after her reasons that she thought she had a handshake deal with the universe didn't pan out, she goes, "All right, let's hurt this guy." That feels evil, but based out of ignorance, evil.
Exactly.
I don't think that her intent wasn't to hurt him per se. It was
Exactly.
more like the consequences of that.
She cared less about
cared less about it. Exactly.
Let's see. We got some of these comments. See if there's if you only do good to have good happen to you, then that's not the best. Do good because you should. That goes back to even yeah, true. It even goes back to like people who do good, who donate to charities and then brag about it. I think that kind of almost erases the good. Like it doesn't erase it clearly, but it just feels weird to me to go and do something positive just to make yourself look better.
Like helping people is good, but helping people solely so that you get props for it is not. So it's like you did a good thing, but the reason behind it, is the reason why you're not getting the result. Like if you wanted props for helping people, that's why we're not going to give you props, because instead of just giving you props for being a good person and helping people, you want props for having the ability to help people.
Yeah. And yeah. And Sachin, you asked a question in the chat that said, so it boils back to that same question, but in different wording. I kind of like, is it really evil if it has good motives?
Yeah, and I think in my opinion, the motives count. Really, that's the biggest thing.
I think they're everything.
I can do something, and you may think it's evil, but if I feel like I did it with a good intention, that's for me. I shouldn't be looked at as the evil person. I shouldn't be made out to be the evil person. Like there are consequences of your actions, and you should kind of at least know that there's going to be some. Not everyone's going to be happy about what you do.
Oh yeah.
And so some people may look at it as terrible. Some people may look at it as that was the greatest thing you've done.
Dude, you win a Nobel Peace Prize, and some people will still call you.
Some people still hate you. Yeah, like the person you were against maybe will hate you for the rest of your life. But if you tried to do it, if you tried to make it your intention to do good, I think that tells you more about the person than.
It goes around that concept of do the ends justify the means, or do the means justify the ends?
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think what I think it goes down to like what if what you did was pure at heart, then can you really say that it's evil? If it, like you said, if it's in your soul, right? If that energy that you give out is good and positive. Of course, there's going to be people that are not going to always like certain things, right? That's just how the world works, right? But as long as you stay true to you, then that's what really matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think going off of that too, like you shouldn't take other people's opinions of you to make you feel like a bad person,
Yeah.
And so, like you doing what you think is right and other people think is bad and telling you that it's a bad thing to do shouldn't change how you view what you did,
Oh yeah, you have to make up your own
don't
mind.
Don't let people mold you into something that you're not.
Essentially, right.
Because you're a bad motherfucker. You're Vatos Locos forever, man.
And it all kind of boils down to the smartest guy still doesn't know shit in the grand scheme of things, man. Like, I mean, people who think they know everything and then they're gonna spew it like it's the fucking cold hard truth to you. And if you believe it blindly, that's on you.
Right.
But you got to challenge stuff in your head. And like you said, like just because everyone else is saying it's bad, just because everyone else is saying it's good, I mean, sit down and reflect and figure out what you think on it.
No one's gonna know everything. No one can know everything. That's
Yeah.
why it's just you gotta sit down and think about what you did, or learn from other people. For sure.
Yeah.
Can I bring up a topic that is a same topic, but like
Sure.
changing
Sure.
it.
Like,
Basically,
Bring it.
would something be considered evil if the harm that it's doing isn't necessarily on someone else, but onto yourself? If it comes from a pure heart place, like let's say, for example, you were in a relationship with someone and it turns out that it was like a toxic relationship, just all bad. But then like you decide, oh, out of the pureness of my heart, I believe this relationship can work if we fix ourselves, if we do better. And now you're pursuing this relationship you're constantly trying to give your all to it, constantly trying to make it work. Meanwhile, the other person is constantly doing you worse and worse. Like you're only hurting yourself by constantly pursuing this. Are you therefore a better person because you decided, oh, I still want to stick to it? Or are you just, again, going back to ignorance, are you just hurting yourself out of the ignorance and you're not doing good, not necessarily doing evil either? Is it just a neutral thing? Like,
it feels morally neutral as well.
I think initially, right, it's the thought that counts. But then over time, you kind of have to look at yourself and go, okay, is what I'm doing like affecting things for the better, or are things just staying the same, or are they getting worse? And if it's not anything but getting better, then at that point it just kind of becomes destructive and pointless, and you really are putting yourself in a bad situation. And
I think it also makes it easier for you to get out of the situation if you think that what you're doing is right. And so if you think what you're doing is right, you can easily get out of it in saying that the other person is kind of looking at it in a different way than you're trying to make it out to be. I think that makes it a little bit easier to come out. But again, it's hard because at least relationship-wise, it's probably really hard.
Oh yeah, especially if you love somebody, because if you love somebody, you're gonna sacrifice a lot for that person.
I would call it morally neutral because of all the factors involved. Like, I mean, I've been in relationships that are, like you reflect and you're like, God damn, man, that should have ended a while ago, and I mean, when you're in it, it's just not as cut and dry, I mean, there's a lot of emotions involved. There's a lot of just side factors. There's a lot of like I said, emotions. And by the way, Kieran says about Zeo's question, it's evil. You are a human being deserving good just like everyone else.
I also like that he put that quote in there about what you were saying. A man who knows he knows something knows he knows nothing at all.
Well, yeah, the more you know, the more you know that you don't know anything.
Kind of like how I really appreciate the fact that, or I don't know if appreciate is the right word, but I find the fact that we can see billions and billions of miles into space. Like we can see so far out of space. We've never seen the actual like center of. There's so much of the ocean that we've never explored. Like we know more about space than we know about the planet we live on. Yeah. And it's like we know a lot, we know so little.
Even worse though is the fact that like we know so much about we the three things we don't know. Two of them make sense. The depths of the ocean, very hard to get to, a very high pressure. Right. Space, fucking too huge. We're little tiny ants, barely. And the human mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like how little we know about our own mind is crazy.
Yeah.
And mental health in America is a good example of that. I mean, I've seen people that are genuinely probably good people, but you like how Nick was saying earlier, there's the mental aspect of it skews a lot of stuff. There's a guy I know that has bipolar and schizophrenia. Two people I know like that. One of them had wanted to die by cop, and they sent him to a mental ward for a week. He came out and I said, did they help you? They give you new meds or anything? He's like, I don't need help. What do you mean? Mm-hmm. So a whole week, you could get out there with a BB gun, paint it black, and come back out a week later like nothing happened. Back to the same you were.
Mm-hmm. If you're not getting the help that you need, right, that's bad. But then, and also, if you're not accepting the fact that you need help, that's even worse, because that's like number one right there is being able to accept it yourself. Because everybody around you, they all could be trying to help you, but if you yourself are not in that mindset of I need to change, then you'll never change.
I believe to try to do everything on your own is such a failed concept. I mean, because personally, I believe that if our mission or our time spent on this earth isn't for our interactions with literally the other people on earth, what is it for? Because if we are the only human on earth, there's nothing for us anymore.
Nope.
But like
people say the worst form of torture is being put into solitary confinement.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah,
in a period of time.
Yeah.
There was a there's been some articles, and I've just like talking with like a couple of my uncles that kind of have kind of read up on this. Like there's like this energy that like humans kind of give off on each other, like and it's like whether it's positive or negative, it all kind of like kind of energizes us. If you're not, and I've known this from personal like experience, like if you're not around people for a while, right, or if you just kind of like seclude yourself in your room for a little bit, you start to think about things, and that you really shouldn't be, like pointless things sometimes, and you start getting in your head, and then like that loneliness kind of just allows you to kind of veer off into space, and kind of just get lost.
Start feeding the
But then-
wolf.
Yeah. As soon as you get back though with people that are positive, or good people in your life, all that those bad thoughts, like they tend to go away, and they become positive, and they become like, oh yeah, I want to change things. I want to change certain things that I might have felt negatively about, and it's just that what I'm trying to say. It's just that motivation that you get from just being around, good, positive people.
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
what's up, Ryan? We got a new visitor. I've been trying to say what's up to people because last time Mark and I did this, we didn't see the chat until like it was like we were like an hour 15 in, and we're like, oh, and I'm like, what the hell? There's like 15 comments. I'm like, no, man, there are people in here. We were on a roll though. It was fun.
Karen says you get the call to the void. Yeah, that's true, man.
Yeah.
You get this. You just get lost in it, and that's like if you don't get yourself out, man, that's just a never-ending cycle of just bad thoughts.
Oh yeah,
we got to get Ryan out here. I would have loved for
true.
Ryan to be a part of this stream too. Like this would be dope to have Ryan or Kieran honestly in this stream. Y'all got to join us Thoughtful Thoughts sometime. But sorry, I cut it off. I think you were about to say something.
I don't remember.
Sorry.
That is fine. But no, I don't think we really had many more questions because I think the last one we had here was kind of already addressed a little bit. But I'm gonna ask it anyway in case you guys don't feel like it was.
Before you ask, can I add one more thought about that last thing? Because
Sure.
I just thought about it. About like the void and being alone and whatnot. I just thought about. I saw a video recently about a show from our childhood, Fairly Odd Parents. Apparently there's an episode in which Timmy wishes that he and his crush Trixie were the last two people on the planet, and the video that I was watching was pointing out how his crush Trixie gets a lot of flack for being like this uppity like crazy chick. Like she got clingy to him when she found that they were the only ones alive, and she like tried to chase him down with a plane, and all kinds of crazy stuff was going on. And the whole thing was that it was like, if you really think about the situation, Timmy wished for them to be the only two people on Earth. He made it so that he was all she had.
Yeah.
And then when she started getting really clingy, he was like, I don't want this anymore. And she went mad because imagine if you're the last person on Earth and the only other person is trying to hide it. Exactly.
He had two
other people helping him.
That's pretty messed
You're the
up,
last
man.
person on Earth, and the only other person that you can talk to is trying to avoid you now.
Yeah.
And it's like, she wasn't really crazy for thinking,
No.
I need to track this guy down. I need to stay by him. Timmy's just kind of due for using her memory and having her go through this traumatic event.
Now she had a punishment out of it. That is I never saw that episode. Mark, actually I remember what I was gonna ask. I was gonna say, don't you find it odd that like that pretty much anytime you're by yourself for an extended period of time, eventually the negative thoughts somehow win?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard an example otherwise. Like there's never a guy who's gone, I'm a fucking just stay by myself for 15 days and came out like, man, it's a beautiful day.
You and Megan were watching the show alone for so long. Were there any situations in there in which somebody like actively you could see them?
There's this guy in Alone who he came in and he became my favorite person ever on that show. Alone's a survival show. And so essentially they go out into the wilderness by themselves. A lot of the times on Vancouver Island, they were just in Mongolia. This one guy had the first time he did it twice because he was on their redemption season. And the first time he goes out there, he's like immediately just like climbing up a hill like this fucking hill, man. My feet are getting caught here, and this is the worst. And then he survived about a long time out there. By the time he was done, he was kind of like beaten up and everything. And he's like, oh. And then you learn on the redemption one, he goes, said, yeah, when I got back home, I didn't want to go back to work because I was already pissed off with work. I really wanted to win the grand prize because I didn't want to go back there and have to do all this again and have to go be an electrician, have to go and do all this bullshit. And he's like, he said, but now this time when he was about 55 days in and he decided he's going to tap, he said, he's like, this time I realized I'm looking at it wrong, man. I miss my wife. I miss my family. I have a good job. I have a good boss.
Yeah.
And so it was crazy to see alone, like being alone had the impact on him. That was the exact opposite. It beat the negativity out of him because he's like, this is a punishment.
Yeah.
I was really taking it for granted.
There's an episode of The Twilight Zone. It's actually with the actor Burgess Meredith, the guy who played Mickey in Rocky.
Oh, nice.
And he's this guy. He's got like his wife like kind of bosses him around, and I think people at work even, right, like they kind of give him shit, and like he just says to himself at some point, he's like, man, like I just want to be alone. Like I don't want anybody around me. He's like, that would be the greatest thing, is to just be able to just do what I want to do and not have outside factors trying to tell me what to do. So anyway, so he goes into like this vault. I think he works at a bank or something like that. And there's like an earthquake or something, right? And he comes out and like there's nobody on Earth except him. And at first, he's like, "Oh wow, yeah, this is great," And he goes in. He he goes like to some diner. He gets like some food, right? Like or not a diner, probably like a grocery store or something, because there's nobody left to cook shit for him. But anyways, so he goes to, I think he goes to like a grocery store or something, right? He gets food for himself, and he's listening to music and he's relaxing, and things are good for like the first couple of days, I think. And then all of a sudden, like he starts missing his wife, and he's like, man, like I really wish I had my wife with me right now. And he started thinking about his friends, and like then all of a sudden, like all that happiness that he had, that feeling of freedom, kind of turned just into depression. And like that's basically what the whole the ending of that is, basically that he goes crazy, and that this dream of being alone is actually becomes a negative thing.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I may have seen this episode. I'm not completely sure, but it sounds really familiar, and I don't know. I love that show. It did a lot of episodes about things that just make you really have to think about your perspective on life and where you are and the things that you experience, and that's really dope.
Oh yeah, no man. I mean, there's a lot of. I actually find it awesome just to like hear stories and see stories of that give you like moral lessons without actually having to really experience.
Yeah.
I actually like what Kieran commented there. He said negative thoughts are a heavier energy and easier to collect. Plus, if you believe in past lives, you still have the karma playing out in your current life. Technically speaking, there's no such thing as pure positive energy. It's much more like less negative, which you can prove that with the concept of like cold and hot, or light and dark even. There's no such thing as cold as a thing. Like you can't add cold to something. You can only remove heat from it. That's what the concept of cold is the lack of heat. And darkness is just the lack of light. There's no like adding darkness to something. And I kind of like that because it goes back to yin and yang again, both having each other within themselves. Like yin isn't the lack of yang, it's just less yang than it is yin. It's not like, and yang, vice versa. I like that. I just like the fact that Kieran commented that. I like that thought to add in there.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like would the inverse be true too, where there's no such thing as pure negative energy? It's much more like less positive. For example, whenever you have a negative thought, you say, oh no, it's not going to go right anyway. It's almost like you're accepting that it could. I mean, that going right is a possibility. Like you're
Mhm.
saying it won't, but
Mm-hmm.
there still is the positivity of that fucking could happen. I'm admitting it could. It's just not going to.
Or at least in your mind, it's not going to, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Feeding the wrong wolf, right?
Nope.
It all comes down to the balance.
Yeah.
What you let in, what you let out.
With that balance said, do you think there's a chance that understanding balance in general, do you think that feeding both wolves is kind of important for that, or do you think that that matters at all? Like, do you think that if you feed just one wolf, it'll give you a better view or understanding of what you need or where you need to be?
Is it
Or
realistic?
is it realistic? Like,
Well, yeah, I think that positive and negative energy, like they're both important. Like you have to feel both,
Oh yeah.
right?
mhm,
You want to be happy, right, and all that, but at the same time, like you have to also have to cry and
yeah,
feel down about things, because when you do those do those things, it reminds you, or it over time reminds you of why it's good to be happy instead of being sad, or even yeah, like just like being crying out, crying over something might actually help you to realize, wait, why am I crying? Maybe I should work at trying to better myself or something.
Yeah, and I
yeah,
think it's mostly like those wolves. Like you don't have to have those two. It's good to feed both of them, but eventually those are gonna die, and no new ones are gonna come by, and so
yeah,
that new balance is gonna continuously be changing. And
True.
so it's hard to say, like, should you feed one? Maybe one point in your life it's better to feed both of them. Maybe
mhm.
one point in your life you want to feed one over the other. I think it just depends what you're going through at that time as well.
Yeah.
Hey, so I think the last question, this one would be a good one to ask here. And Nick asked this one. He posed this question. He said, "Are cats the spawn of Satan?"
Oh my god.
Well,
There it is.
That was yeah, just having a little fun before the stream.
I mean, it's totally possible. I won't deny it. I have a cat, and I did not spawn him myself. But
hey,
he
I
does.
knew a cat named Lucifer, and that's enough said. All right.
Um,
What are you gonna-
actually, if I can, I'm probably going to do
Continue.
this a lot anytime we stream. I'm going to reference like movies, television shows, video games, random things like that. That's kind of my way of entertaining myself. But a reference to the I won't say, so it's a reference to a show. I won't say the show because I don't want to spoil things while I talk about the story. But there's a show that's kind of recent. That's why I won't say it. Where basically they show two sides of kind of one story, and portray it in a way. It's funny because this show is supposed to be comical, but it gets really, really deep. There's one character who long ago lost his family, and when he lost his family, he set up a program to constantly remind himself that it was his fault, so that he never forgets that he has a goal to, right what was wrong. And so that he has a program constantly in his ear, no matter where he goes. He can't avoid it. He always hears it. And he basically submerged himself in that depression. He made sure that he wouldn't forget how sad it made him, how hurt he was, how bad he felt about what he did. Meanwhile, there's another character being shown that used to be the one to submit to emotions and say, you can cry, you can feel for people, while the character that, is forcing himself to deal with these emotions usually told him, no, grow up, you got to be tough, you got to be strong. Eventually something happens in which the character who was usually more prone to, expressing his emotions, he loses his entire family and decides, I lost my family because I was too weak, I was too emotional, I got to be strong. So as time passes, he ends up becoming heartless and ruthless. And when he finally sees his son again, who he thought he lost, he was willing to kill him. He was like, no, life is bad. It's crazy. You can't be emotional. You can't show weakness. And it basically showed a flip side to their personalities. The one who used to be very emotional submitted only to cutting off emotion, while the character who's usually cut off from emotion submitted heavily to only being.
What's funny is that's another cognitive bias, the all or nothing thinking. When people think, as soon as you scapegoat something, you go, all right, the inverse has to be true because of the fact that I was too emotional. I need to stop that. Instead of like, I need to lessen it. I need to, throttle down a little.
And it was a great lesson that they taught in that show. That was by showing those two opposite sides of the spectrum. It kind of made you look and go like, yeah, this guy's really messed up because he won't allow himself to move on from that. He understood the problem of it, but wouldn't allow himself to move on.
Kind of goes back to the yin and yang thing, where people or the possibility of either side evolving or become like changing into the opposite.
Yeah, true.
Exactly.
Definitely.
You want to keep talking smack over there? Or?
No, I was gonna say. Kieran said something I found kind of funny. And I told you I was gonna say that next, but I get a little spacey doing these, Mark. No, but he said the wolves, going back to that, should be married so they could bone and bring out the best of both worlds.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Wow.
I think the wolves should discipline their emotions.
But no, Mark. So what were you saying again?
What was I saying? But yeah, I mean, I don't know. So do we have anything else to really add to this then, or so like is there any other questions or
anything from anyone in the chat?
I think that's it from me. I gotta go eat some food.
Yeah.
I'm all good too.
Well, all right. Well, this was another episode of Thoughtful Thoughts.
Always fun, guys.
We hope that you we hope that you were intrigued, or we hope that we've sparked some interest in thinking.
Yes, we
thinking
do.
for yourselves. So, yeah, we'll be back for another one sometime.
Looking forward to it.
Until then, be mindful and be thought provoking.
Yeah, and thank you everyone in the chat for joining and watching and listening.
Yeah, seriously, thanks Luke, Kieran, Mecca, Ryan, everybody that joined. Freaking, this was
very fun, guys.
Yeah, thanks for dropping in, guys. It was a pleasure.
Great.
Yeah, maybe Fernandez will have his microphone or his camera working.
Yeah, so you could see my beautiful face.
Yeah.
We want to.
Yeah.
It was funny because every time we talked, I was like looking at the bubble and I'm just like, that's not Nick.
Oh my god, that's hilarious. I'll do better next time.
No, dude, I'm happy. You got some good insight.
His bubble is just a really close up of Yang. That's all it is.
All right, guys. We'll see you next time.
Take care.
Peace out.
Save the wave.